This is a true story. Maximizing your space and utilization and overcoming limitations is often a challenge. Or it's a matter of playing, assessing, and seeing what you've got. By identifying the materials immediately that you've got and just starting to use it, one can always change things later and adapt as you go along. Various materials that you will find in your yard or the neighbor's yard, along the street, a family member. Simply start by asking someone. This will lead to another person and eventually towards. Dogs can often be a problem. Start by utilizing what you've got. They will spot what you need and see you doing something. Often take to the hand and provide you with what you need and bring about some extra advice. Reusing materials goes a far way. There's no need to buy. It's all about seeing what do I need, what have I got. If you don't have the tools you think you need, think of how you can use this tool or other tool to achieve what you'd like to achieve, like these drainage holes over here. Start packing out your containers, and you can always build on as you go along, collecting more and more and more. Trellisings work great, especially for pumpkins. Combined with cucumbers, you've got quite a treat, and your winter stock. By making use of plastic bottles, you can make mini greenhouses, especially for this time of the year to speed things up. Utilizing mulch, old newspapers, getting in some worms from friends, that's your start.
My name is Adrian. 1 year ago, I decided to start a garden. Like, thought I was limited to donate the material to start the garden. In a year after, I asked a friend of mine to give me some seeds. He gave me some seeds. And I started my garden. And here's my garden now.
Right, good afternoon, everyone. It's welcome all of you to this month's edition of the District 9350 Foodgardens Webinar. We've got a packed agenda once again, so I'm really looking forward to today's topics. As normal, if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat window. I'll moderate the questions and present them. Ben, our guest speaker, one of our guest speakers, has got to leave at 5:30 sharp. So if any questions come up for Ben, we will forward them to him after he's left, if he's left before we can deal with the questions. But thank you all for attending. We've got, again, a great attendance, and I see there's people logging in as we go along. So with no further ado, let me hand over to our guest speaker for this afternoon. It's Ben Getz from Urban Harvest, and he's going to be talking, I think, about home gardens, if I'm not mistaken, Ben, and sharing your knowledge and tips and tricks and some of the info on that. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'd love to share my screen. So if you can give me, whoever's sharing currently needs to log off there. Oh, there we go. Cool. Can you see my screen?
We can see your screen, Ben. Thank you.
Cool. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really loved that video, and it's a great, super creative and a great segue into some of the topics that I hope to cover. So I've got quite a bit of time, 25 minutes is quite a while. So yeah, bear with me, and I hope that there'll be a nice gap for live Q&A at the end. And as Doug said, if there's any overflow questions, then I'll get to those over email. So let me start by just introducing myself. My name's Ben. I'm the managing director of a company called Urban Harvest Edible Gardens. I've personally been food gardening for 30 years. I started at about age 13. My company's been going for 18 years. We have initiated over 450 food garden projects. So the focus of of what Urban Harvest does is we design, install, and manage organic food gardens in a wide variety of contexts. Gardens, we do gardens at private residences, kind of ranging from informal homes in Makaza or Khayelitsha to consulates in Bishop's Court. We do corporate food gardens, so hotels and restaurants. At the moment, like right now, we're about wrapping up a beautiful rooftop garden at one of Sanlam's head offices in Tiger Valley. And then a lot of the work that we do is also at community food garden scale, mostly in under-resourced communities, but not only, at schools, old age homes, hospices, contexts like that. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to spend maybe another 2 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes going through some photos and talking you through some of the projects that we do and have done. And there's 2 reasons for that. The main one is to just set the broader stage, in a sense, for home food gardens and where I think they fit in. So yeah, I mean, this particular photo is a project we did many years ago. These are all actually quite old projects. This is a school garden over here. This is also a school garden, and this is also a school garden. So on the under-resourced community projects, one of our favorite places to do projects is in schools. This is a private school garden, and it's a small space garden, which will probably speak quite nicely to some of the stuff that's to come. But this is, as you can see, a little bit fancy in a sense, but it's a lovely use of a small space. Actually, one of the things I can say about this particular project that might be of interest on a practical level is that north is over here. And so there's actually quite a lot of shading in winter across the garden because of this wall. And so what we actually put up across the garden on this side is a reflector, which is really just a thin steel sheet that's on hinges. So it actually doubles as a door, like a big swing door that keeps the kids out when they're not meant to be there, but it also reflects the light, and it works very, very, very well. I was quite surprised at how well it works, and since then we've been using it on quite a few projects where it's necessary. Yeah, this is a bigger kind of community garden in Strandfontein. This is a center for men and women coming out of prison or out of the gang system or off drugs, or a combination of all 3. And the food from that project feeds into 12 different community projects where they have soup kitchens. So I'm sure I don't need to sell you guys on the benefits of community food gardens. That's in a way why we're all here. I think soon enough we're going to move on to the home food garden story, but just I'm going to scroll through some of these photos just to kind of give you a sense of different styles of gardens, community gardens. This is a lovely 8-week progression from your standard. This is in also Strandfontein kind of area, using upcycled wine bottles, which is quite a challenging thing to use, at least to do it neatly, but can be readily available. So 8 weeks to first harvest. I think the last time I spoke to you guys, I actually went through kind of a step-by-step installation guide. That's not really for today. But maybe what I'll do is just, maybe I'll start with this project. So this is just to kind of talk through what our community food garden model does. So for example, this garden took about 4 weeks to build, and we employed local community members to work with my team to build the garden. It's at preschool, pre-primary school. And there's a garden champion employed by the project who looks after the garden on a daily basis. And then my team comes in once a month with resources and expertise, which is an important element in the sustainability of a garden like this. I think a community garden needs an on-site garden champion, but you also need access to resources, good quality at a good price, resources and expertise ongoing. Yeah, so and I think also beauty is an important aspect. Let's just see where we are. Cool. I'm gonna head on to kind of comparing community gardens to food gardens. So no, that's not what I mean to do, sorry. That's what I mean to do. Yeah, so the benefits of community gardens, community building, beautiful ecological spaces to share, large-scale production potential, those are obvious. And there are many more benefits, and I imagine all of you can kind of come up with those. I think the challenges are more important to highlight. So to install a community food garden that's going to work in the long term, it needs all the elements for sustainability. For example, it may need fencing. It may very well need a well point or a borehole, certainly some kind of access to water, even if it's municipal tap. Raised beds have, from my point of view, are very important, even though they're expensive. One can do a garden without them, but the maintenance required over long term to maintain a community garden that doesn't have raised beds, and also the cost to the soil quality and long-term nutrition for the plants is very high if you don't have the raised beds. So you've got to put in the fencing, the water, the raised beds. Those are the basics, good quality soil to at least to build it, if not to start with it. So it's expensive to install. There's also politics, shifting community politics, and that, you know, if your project's centered around 8 community members that are supposed to be working together, one of those people not working in alignment with others can cause massive problems, and a whole project can flop based on one person potentially. Also, like food logistics, what to do with lots of food. There's refrigeration, transport, packaging questions, even if it's direct from farm to table on site. That's another level of complexity. So you're not just growing food, you're now marketing food or selling food or cooking food in a communal setting. The biggest challenge, of course, and the most important element is sustainability. So you've got people working in the garden. Are they paid? How are they paid? And I mean whether they're generating an income for themselves or being paid through a project. That's a very important aspect. And the more people there are involved, the more challenging it is to make sure that everyone's getting something worthwhile from a community garden. Access to resources. So the first plantings happened, it's 2 months later, you need new seeds, new seedlings, compost, mulch. Is there transport to collect that? Is there money to buy it? Of course, there's the idea that a garden should be self-sustainable. So, you know, can we make all the compost? Can we make all the seedlings? I think the short answer is possibly, but I don't see many examples of that. I see very, 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 very few examples of that on a community garden level, if any examples. So one needs to get resources brought in, generally speaking, and that costs in terms of time, transport, knowledge. A community garden needs more skills than just garden skills, and garden skills alone are not a challenge, but you know, there's a lot of skills through the seasons to know how to manage different plants. All the different plants have special TLC needs. But then when you're in a community garden, there's other skills like social, how to deal with the people you're working with and how to deal with money if that comes into it. Yeah, and I've kind of, it's a bit of a repetition, but to say that the project is often reliant on one or a few people, therefore it's less resilient. If one person, God forbid, gets sick or decides to give up, that can have a massive knock-on effect to a community garden. So I've kind of highlighted a lot of the regular challenges with a large garden. Here we're moving on to the main topic of the day, which is home gardens. And I'm highlighting not challenges because I actually don't think there are, I mean, there are challenges, we could find some, but mostly there's benefits in relation to community gardens. So there's community building as well, but it's on a much more intimate level. It's on a household level between granny and grandchild, or parents and their kids, or kids and their parents. There's also relationships built across the wall. So growing some vegetables, even though it's on a relatively small scale, you're getting it as fresh as possible, direct from your stook to your kitchen. You're growing what you want only. So yeah, you've got full control over the outcomes and full personal responsibility, which has an additional sort of life psychological benefit, learning that what you reap is what you sow is what you'll reap, and there's much less room to blame somebody else for it not working. So it's empowering to grow food in your own backyard. It's relatively easy and inexpensive to maintain. All of these are in relation to community, what I've been through talking about the community gardens. You can make use of available resources and scale to suit your specific desires. Maybe you just want 6 spinach plants and that's enough to augment what you're eating, and that's all you've got time for or all you've got passion for. Fine, so have 1 container with 6 spinach plants, or you want to grow on your roof, grow on your walls, and I know that the next speaker will be going into those, like what you can do and how to do it and different containers. But the point is that it's scalable on a personal level. One of the biggest problems with community gardens is often people start something that's way too big for them to maintain. They think, oh, we've got, you know, the whole rugby field's available, let's start a farm. Well, here's a little bit of advice if you're thinking along those lines, is start very small and go high quality in a small space rather than try to roll something out over a big space, specifically because of costs and realities around maintaining something like that. Yeah, there's a greater chance of long-term sustainability because there's low risk to start and low cost to continue, and there's also a low cost if you decide actually you don't like it. Then it's your little home food garden that gets packed away for a couple of months or a year or forever, as opposed to a big community garden where a couple of people pull out and like big money and big time. And also, there's every time a community garden flops, there's a cost to food gardening in general, and also to the sort of community spirit, because it was something people were excited about in the beginning, and now it's another failure. So it's really important that whatever gets started gets sustained, and that's something that we say to our whoever is involved, stakeholders, funders in our projects. We say, like, community garden, it needs funding forever. It needs support forever. That's the fact. It's not a fact most funders want to hear, but there are obviously models that work without funding, but the quality, I'm sharing my experience after 18 years of doing it. What else? I spoke about intergenerational connection, and I mean, I could have made many bullet points, but I think this is a really valuable one. We have seen just huge improved relationships between kids and their parents, or the grandparents and the kids, and it's really wonderful. on a home scale. So you're building family community and then connections across, as I said, with neighbors. If someone leaves, it doesn't fall apart because, well, there's somebody else in the family can pick it up. But if everyone decides to pack in the towel again, the costs are, it's only to that family, and they've obviously weighed up the pros and cons for them, and that's fine for them. Yeah, it's small scale self-reliance and real resilience on a home scale. So those are so now what I'd like to kind of shift to is to say, okay, well, I've said home gardens have a lot of benefits, particularly in terms of, also in terms of funders and funding. You can take 120,000 Rand. It's just a number, but it's from our point of view, it's a relevant number for a community garden. You can set up a really nice community garden, really good, big, highly productive community garden for 120,000 Rand. You can do something for less or more, but that's a fair number. With home food gardens, you could take that money and set up 20 families to be growing food for themselves forever and have real education. And the success rate is going to be well over 80%. Whereas that food garden, community food garden, that 100, in 3 years' time, the success rate may very well be lower than, it might be at 50%. How many community gardens are still working 5-10 years later? Whereas if the family has really taken it on, then it's a forever thing. So I'm going to shift over now to talking about a specific program, which is called the Family Food Gardens program that Urban Harvest runs in collaboration with the Green Pop Foundation. So just a little plug for Green Pop, that if you don't know, they're an NPO that does eco-education, awesome, cool green parties and events. And it started with, and one of their big focuses is planting trees around sub-Saharan Africa, and also fynbos gardens, and now food gardens in collaboration with Urban Harvest. And the food gardens that we do together is very much focused on this small scale family food gardens. So this is our program. I'm just going through the brochure quickly. In fact, sorry, I hope you don't mind, I'm jumping around a little bit. I'm actually rather going to look here for the basic overview. So this is how our family food gardens work. I heard that you had a presentation from ShopRite, and I'm not sure whether this is very similar or not, but we developed this actually for ShopRite many years ago and ran it a number of times with cohorts, but I felt like it wasn't good enough, so we partnered with Green Pop and we've improved it exponentially. It's a really fantastic program now. I knew when I came up with it that it had that it could be something better, but I couldn't get it there myself. So with Green Pop, we really have got it there and are getting it better and better. So we start with partner selection. For example, working with the Earthchild Project was our first, the first organization that we worked with. More recently, we're working with Christelle House. So we find an organization that's already working in a community. We partner with them. Then we have stakeholder engagement workshops where we meet with them and talk through the program very carefully. Then we rework the program to customize it to each community and to each, in fact, within each community, to each cohort. So every time we run it, there are slight adaptations that we make it more specific for that group. And then this is what we actually do. We run a one-day workshop with 20 people. We've run it with kids. We've run it with kids and their parents. We've run it with teachers and their students. And we've run it just with parents or adults. And we found so far really that it works best running it with this program, running it with adults, because invariably they do involve their children. Whereas when we run it with children, the uptake of the parents is less. So yeah, and there's other reasons why we find it works better with adults, this particular program. So we run a one-day workshop, and during the course of the workshop, they build their own small container garden with an integrated earthworm farm. They don't just build it, they also get taken through Gardening 101. I actually run the workshop myself, but Green Pop's also there, so we do run it together. And then, so at the end of the day, we take them home with their family food garden pod, make sure that they place it appropriately, and then starts the real training, which is 12 months of WhatsApp support. So they get we've got a very well developed curriculum. It's like 150 page, but beautifully. I'm going to show you some of it just now, if there's time. I see that my time is actually running quite low. So I'm going to speed up. So 12 months WhatsApp curriculum. They get data, because that was one of the problems we ran into, like actual WhatsApp data is part of the program. They get prizes, they get awards. We also do in-person check-ins. They get all the resources they need for 12 months are given to them at the workshop. Seeds and other resources. For example, we give them a comfrey root, and they grow comfrey as one of their first activities when they get home. Like the first lesson they get is welcome home, make sure your pod's in the right place, recapping what they learned in the course. And the curriculum's amazing. It's like, you know, how to do vertical gardens, how to make container gardens, how to manage an earthworm farm, how to prepare the beetroots and the spinach and the cabbage and the leeks and things that they grow, how to germinate the seeds that they've been given. There's a plant by numbers plan for the whole year, and the curriculum follows that. So the food garden pod is a small thing. It's a seed pack. It's a starter kit for training home gardeners in. Let's see what the next thing that I want to just show you is. Here's just some photos of the family food garden. This is the particular program that we ran with. I see. I've got some other photos here as well, which is good. With Crystal House, and then these are some of the Earth Children. So yeah, those are some photos. And then I just want to show you the WhatsApp group, the live WhatsApp group. This is just one of the cohorts. So for example, this is one of the, let's just see how this opens up. Yeah, and this is just one page in a curriculum. It's so they meet once a week. Although every day, as you'll see, there's lots of live Q&A. This is a really amazing community building tool, because people are like encouraging each other and, wow, how did you do that? Or what's wrong with, sorry, I mean, this is not that interesting because it's just a lot of text. I'm trying to get to some, you know, where people share pictures of the meal that they made, or questions around their plants. Yeah, here's somebody, I mean, this is yesterday, for example, somebody sharing her garden and what's going on there. Somebody showing their comfrey. I mean, I haven't kind of looked through this to hand pick what to show you, but essentially these groups are super busy and super inspiring, and lovely, because they're really in, this group is 20 people sharing their homes and their lives together through 12 months. And you see that the curriculum, for example, it's beautiful. It's, yeah, they actually get given the curriculum in a book, hard copy at the workshop, but then it's also run through via WhatsApp. I think I'm going to not sign off, just hand over for some questions, because it looks like there's maybe 3 minutes left.
Yeah, Ben, thank you so much for that. That is absolutely fascinating. I love it. Just a question first. Chris, I see you've got your hands up, but let me first just, Anton asks, how do you structure a home project with funding, selection of candidates, etc.? and it was in my mind as well, you know, how could we engage, take our communities to engage with you and Green Pop?
So I mean, the biggest, I mean, there are many ways of answering this. Like the main issue is funding. So so these projects are funded by different corporates. For example, the Crystal House one is funded by Naked Insurance. The Earthchild, we've run about 13 cohorts so far together, Green Pop and Urban Harvest. So we need funding to do a cohort. The cost depends slightly on how the particular program is structured, but it's around 120,000 Rand, which is for 20 people to go through the workshop, get the earthworm farm and container garden, and go through the 12 months training with data, prizes, awards, in person, all the everything. And the data that we've got so far is really, really, really encouraging. As I said, in terms of the success rate of people not only maintaining their pod, but extending it beyond that. If there are any communities or groups, church groups or school groups or other organizations that you work with that you think this would work well for, and it can work very well as an add-on to a community garden, actually. So it don't have to be in isolation. This is great training for community garden champions. And actually, if they're doing well at home and showing that out of a group of 20, they're the star performer, then that person might be just the right person to place in a community garden, for example. So if you've got organizations that you think this will work for, you can contact me or make contact with me and we can chat about it. The main question is, if we had somebody came forward and said, we love this program, we can see the data, we want to roll it out, and here's X, 10 million Rand, we could run it for, I don't know what the maths is, but probably 100, 200, whatever it is, 200 families, probably 2,000. I don't know. My brain's not so quick on the maths in the moment, but the point is, we can do it.
Great. Excellent. Thanks, Ben. And then Chris, let's just take your question. And then I know Ben has got to drop off. He's got some things to do. There are a couple of other questions, but we'll forward those to Ben via email. Chris, over to you. Chris, are you there? No. Okay, Ben, let's wrap on that. There are a couple of other questions, and I see Daleen has also said that she has invited Green Pops to present at Belleville Rotary Club. She will extend the invite to other Rotary clubs to join that presentation when it comes off. But Ben, it just leaves me to say thank you so much for your time. That was absolutely fascinating. I hope we can engage with you and your organization more in the future. And I just wanted to share a quote as we close off this segment from it. And we think about gardening about the food output, which is obviously really important. But a quote that I saw from a gentleman by the name of Doug Green is a vegetable garden doesn't just feed your body, it also feeds your soul. And we need to remember it's a holistic approach to what we're trying to do. So Ben, thank you so much for your time. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
Great pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Excellent, thanks. Right, folks, that then moves on to Wolfgang from Rotary Club of Windhoek, who's going to share what they're doing with vegetable gardening in containers. Wolfgang, over to you.
Yes, hello, good afternoon, everybody. Ben mentioned in his pros and cons, the last point, small space. And that is actually the subject that I will talk to you about. There's place for container garden anywhere. If you have enough light, you can even have it on the windowsill of your flat. So there are no size restrictions, there are no area restrictions. Another advantage is it needs very little soil and water. It is easy to maintain. And even when setting it up and you use containers from the dump site, from upcycling, you get them at no cost. Next slide, please. The plants that can be grown in a container are actually all the stuff that we would usually use in our kitchens. So it's broccoli, carrots, cucumbers, eggplants, beans, all kinds of lettuces, radish. There are some things that are easier and some things that are a little bit more complicated or need more attention. One thing that always works well anywhere in the bigger or the smallest container is herbs. The one thing one has to keep in mind is when you grow in container, it needs more regular watering and fertilizing, as they simply use up the available resources quicker than they would in an open garden. Next slide, please. To start off, the soil for containers, you should not use the normal garden soil. It is too heavy, it compacts too much. So soil in containers has to be a little bit looser. It needs good aeration. The drainage has to be good. And you can actually mix that yourself. Instead of using a so-called soilless potting mix, which costs you quite a bit if you buy it at the garden center, you can mix your own with the available garden soil and compost and wood chips and things like that. So humus is a fantastic material to add to any container garden that you set up. Next slide, please. The watering of the containers is also very important. Very often it happens that you water too much. So doing that early in the morning is actually the best. And I found that I get good results if I only water when I notice the first signs of the leaves hanging. That's when my container plants get water again. The watering has to happen deeply because the roots go deep in the pots. With watering deeply, we mean that you really give sufficient water, maybe until you see the water seeping out through the hole at the bottom of the pot. There's also the option of watering from the bottom. That means if you have a bigger pan or container underneath your plant container, you can put the water in there and the plants will pick up that water from the bottom. Next slide, please. Fertilizing, mentioned before, is very important. Even there is no need to buy expensive home plant fertilizers at the garden center. You can make your own fertilizer tea. When you weed your garden, you throw the chopped weeds into a bucket or a trash can or any other container, chopping them up. Then when the container is about half full, you fill it with water and let it stand for a day or two, or maybe even up to 2 weeks. Then you strain off the liquid and use that to water as a fertilizer, or you can also put it in a spray can and spray it onto your plants. Just a tip on the side, Ben also spoke about a worm farm. The worms have what is called either the worm pea or the worm juice. This is actually a fantastic fertilizer, but also a very good organic pesticide. But we'll talk a little bit about the worm farm a little bit further down. Next slide, please. Next slide, yeah, whoops. There we have it. So this is actually the smallest way to start. And it's actually a good way to always start this way because you don't need very much soil. You can practice, you can find out which plants grow the best in your environment. The bottom picture shows some fancy tin cans that you can then even have inside or on the windowsill or on the stoop right next to your door, because they are a little bit more decorative. Leafy salads can be grown up to the harvesting stage in these cottage cheese cups that you see in the top picture. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, no, wait, just a moment. I also like to use the yogurt cups when I do projects with school gardens, where the children, the learners actually get a few seeds. They have to come with their own yogurt or cottage cheese cups. They get some soil and then they take it home and have to grow the seedlings to a certain size before they are transplanted into the actual school garden. And that really gives them a different connection to the plants because they grew them from absolutely nothing. They see the little seedling coming out, they see it grow, and then they look after it a lot better when it's over in the school garden. Next slide, please. Ideal minimal space garden is the vertical garden, and the simplest version of a vertical garden is to actually use a transport pallet. It has to be changed slightly differently because you need kind of the shelf where the containers are put in. The containers, ideal again, there are the cottage cheese or yogurt cups. As you can see in this picture, the salads grow full, the herbs further down grow to full size and can be harvested right out of the vertical garden. Important thing is, even if that thing stands well, when you set it up, always secure it against the wall, because when the plants get bigger, it might topple over and all your work might be destroyed. Or a wind gust gets it and it falls over. So do secure it against the background, the wall, or whatever is behind it. Next slide, please. This actually shows very nicely how you can upcycle any kind of plastic container. The top one is actually the choice of everything that you can find in the dump site. It's oil cans, it's different water cans. The only thing you have to do is clean them out properly first and put some holes in it. Any container that has more than 2 liters, the small ones are actually a little bit too much work and too little harvest. But anything that goes from 2 liters upwards is ideal. Actually, naturally, the 5 liters is even better. Again, here, important to secure them that they don't fall over. Keep in mind the plants grow and get top heavy. Next slide, please. Now, the really serious small space gardener gets very, very innovative. In this picture, we see they took PET bottles and they actually arranged them vertically and horizontally. It's a huge garden on a minimal space. You can use any kind of material that you find to make the rack or the frame out of which you build this construction. Even down to bamboo or cane, which is found along rivers very often. Next slide, please. I only recently stumbled over this indoor herb garden, and I'm already copying it. It's a PET bottle cut in half. The top part is inserted into the bottom part. The cut is about as high as the what you call it, the nozzle, where you screw the cap on, that it reaches down into the bottom of the PET can. You've got water in there. The plants absorb the water from the bottom. You don't need to take it apart to water it. You simply water from the top until you see the water running out at the bottom, until to a level that it doesn't overflow. And then you don't even have to worry about it for a couple of days. So this is actually an ideal thing for people who are not at home frequently and who cannot attend to their garden on a daily basis. Next slide, please. Bags. Bags are a system also that where you can utilize a small garden. You just use shopping bags. Okay, today the shopping plastic bag is not as easily available anymore, but you can take the transparent plastic bags that you can buy in the shops. Transparent is actually quite good because you see how the soil does. Whether it gets too dry or when it gets too wet, you will see a little bit of mold or something showing on the outside of the soil against the plastic bag. So you can do a lot with it. Even the heavy-duty paper bags are suitable. Okay, these only for once-off use, but the flower bags, the 5-kilo flower bags work perfectly. Do not use a cement bag because the cement is, there's too much cement left in it and it's not actually a favorite of the plants. Next slide, please. Then you have the large bag garden. Now here in our country, in Namibia, we all know a farmer or two, and the farmers have huge amounts of these Hessem bags, these white Hessem bags, because that's where they get their salt or whatever mixture it is that they need for the cattle. Setting up this bag garden takes a little bit of effort. When you start doing it, you take a 110 millimeter drainage pipe, a section that is about as high as the bag itself. You put it into the bag vertically, and then you start building up the soil around. But in the pipe, you only add gravel or stones. The reason is that when you've done, you pull out the plastic pipe, and the watering, as you can see in the top picture, actually happens in the middle, because you have to make sure that the water runs all the way down to the plants that are towards the bottom. A nice thing about it, if you have certain plants, I did that for instance with strawberries, it worked perfectly. You make little holes on the side and you put your little seedlings into the holes on the side, and the strawberries will not lie on the ground and get muddy, and yeah, there's no danger of them getting mold because they're lying on the wet mulch or something like that. So it actually works really well. Needs a little bit more space because it's something that you have to do outside. You can't do it. You could do it on a stoop, but it's advisable to have it on a normal soil. The bottom right picture shows a modern high-tech version. It's a plastic container which already has the spaces on the side to add additional plants to it. So there's actually a lot of opportunities with a bag of any kind. Next slide, please. But urban landfill sites are a treasure grove when it comes to containers for gardening. We actually have a school here in Windhoek where they have a very nice garden with flowers, with herbs, with vegetables, and all of them in old toilet pots. They work perfectly because the hole which you have to have at the bottom of each container is there, not at the bottom, but the outlet is a little bit further up. So if there's too much water in it, it will eventually rise and run out of that toilet pot. Looks beautiful. Some of them are painted, some of them are plain white or gray or whatever they were originally. Another very good one is actually the tire garden. Every dump site operator will be happy to hand you old tires because they are very difficult to get rid of. We already spoke about the PET bottles, bathtubs, old boats, the housing of washing machines or dishwashing machines, the inside of a tumble dryer, of a washing machine, so this barrel you have inside there, all of these things can be actually used for a home garden, specifically if your soil is not suitable to plant directly into the ground. Next slide, please. These are a few examples. You can grow potatoes in it easily. It actually works perfectly. You start off with one tire, take your seed potatoes. The seed potatoes are the ones that get these little knobs on them. Not all potatoes that we buy are actually can be used as seed potatoes. But if you have older ones, you will see some of them will get little knobs. Those can be used as seed potato. When the plant grows about, what is it, a hand width over the ground, you add another tire, you add more soil, and you do that up to 3 tires. Now, the nice thing about this type of vegetable growing is that actually, when you harvest, you just pick off one tire after the other and just take out the potatoes. You don't have to dig and look for them. Opportunity, if your neighborhood is not one where you need a fence to protect, but where a fence is simply a decorative thing, is to use old tires to make a garden fence out of them. And now the worm farm can also be made of old tires. What you need there is a piece of corrugated iron that is placed on the ground, slanting slightly to one side, and then you start building up tire by tire your worm farm. You put in all compostable waste. It's actually not waste because we can still use it from your kitchen in there. You need to get the worms only the first time. Every now and then they like some newspaper or old brown corrugated cardboard boxes, but otherwise you don't have to do anything. The only thing you have to make sure, I spoke about the worm juice before, that at the bottom, you see it at the bottom right, you put a container where the worm juice is collected, and that you can keep on using it either as a fertilizer or as an organic pesticide. The other versatile thing with this tire worm farm is, in comparison to the ready-made containers that you can buy, after a certain time, you will have the most perfect soil in the bottom tire. Now, it takes a little bit of strength. You probably need 2 guys and a kufut. I hope you know what a kufut is. This is a very long iron rod to get that tire out at the bottom, but you can pull it out without destroying the top part of it, and then you just keep on filling it from the top again. The worms will always on their own move up to the top level, and where the fresh food is, that is why in between the different tires you always need to put something like shade netting or anything that on the one hand keeps the organics that you feed from falling down, but on the other hand allows the worms to move from the lower tire to the top tire. Next slide, please.
Wolfgang, if you can start wrapping up. We're
Yeah,
running out
I'm
of time.
almost done.
Thanks, boss.
If you have a little bit of a bigger garden, then it's the African keyhole garden. The African keyhole garden is very often practiced in the northern African countries. You can build it out of anything, out of stones or wood or whatever you want to. It's a layering garden because it's a kind of it's a container garden. The next slide, please. The interesting thing about it, or the important thing about it, is that actually in the middle, you have a little segment where you again put in all your organic waste and use that as a composting area. Now, in the more moderate climate areas, you actually only water it on the middle. We here in Namibia cannot do that. We have to water it all around. In the picture in the top, you see my garden this year in the spring. The bottom picture I took today, you see it's almost overgrown. One thing which you might recognize, I always let some plants grow their flowers and seeds, and I collect the seeds to use them at a later stage. And with that, I'm coming to the last slide. How it all starts with the seeds. We don't need special seedling containers from plastic. Again, stuff where we spend money that's not necessary. Egg cartons are actually superb. You cut them apart when you plant it and plant it with the carton into the soil because the carton will dissolve. And even better is if you cut your eggs in the way shown in the bottom picture, you just simply take the eggshell with the seedling and put it into the soil, and in the last moment you just crush the eggshell, and then your plant is transplanted without any damage to the soil, to the roots, sorry. So thanks, that was it.
Wolfgang, thank you so much. That was actually really practical advice and practical ideas. And I'm sure anybody that's got any further questions will reach out to you, but I love the things you shared there. Thank you so much. We now go over to what's fast becoming one of my favorite segments of these webinars, is our own from Helderberg Sunrise, Michelle Nell, sharing tips and tricks. And today she's talking about composting. Thanks, Michelle.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. And Wolfgang set me up so nicely for this. So I thought, there's no talk that is complete around home gardens without talking composting. Composting, I guess, in this first slide, I really just want to mention some of the benefits. Of course, there is, creating your own soil, which is a great cost saving, but also it goes a long way to help the environment. So organic waste that gets sent to landfills and actually lands up fermenting within the plastics creates an immense amount of methane, which is quite a dangerous greenhouse gas. Whereas if you actually use your compost and you put it back into your garden, or your food waste and you put it back into your garden to make compost, what that actually does is it sequestrates the carbon from the environment. So in fact, it actually goes to have the opposite effect than if you were to put it into the landfills. It actually goes to improve the greenhouse gases across the world. So, and that's because of the anaerobic and decomposition that it does when it's really stuck in those plastic bags in the landfills. It also is a great alternative to chemical fertilizers. So obviously chemical fertilizers is a very big cost, but also it does add additional chemicals and pollutants into our environment, which often seep into our water tables, and we'll end up drinking it, which is never great. It also can help in reforestation and really helping those really compact areas of ground. So compost, as you layer it on top, it does become more chunky, and it actually helps aerate the soil, and especially in places that have become quite compact, so either walking paths or old agricultural practices or things like that. One of the interesting things I also learned about using your own garden waste and putting it back into the garden is when you chop and drop your plants. So every time you actually cut any of your plants, they release a growth hormone that actually stimulates the other plants that are surrounding them to grow even faster. So composting not only adds nutrition, but it actually also helps your garden be more productive. Next slide, please. Three main areas or three main methods of composting. So the heap composting, that really is just heaping up all your compost. Worm farming, which Wolfgang covered so wonderfully there. And then there's another one that's called bukashi. Next slide, please. So really, heap composting, or composting as we know it, is just layering your three main ingredients: your browns, which is your garden waste, your dried leaves, your branches, your twigs, your greens, so your vegetable waste, your kitchen waste, your grass clippings, and then just making sure that it has a nice level of moisture in it. And you can really just layer this in your garden and let it there in a pile until it turns into beautiful nutrition and compost to add into your garden. Or you can turn your compost heap, which really just helps all of those bugs and all of that life make your compost much quicker, that you can add it into your garden. Next slide, please. Or of course, worm farming. So Wolfgang covered this so lovely. The tire method is definitely one of my favorites. You also get some fancy worm farming things that you can buy, especially if you've got smaller spaces or you want to put them in your garden. You know, they can look quite nice. And again, it creates great nutrition, as well as an alternative to pesticides that you can use in your garden. And the last one really is bukashi gardening. So bukashi is a natural fermenting bran that you can add. So specifically those that are maybe living in apartments or flats or don't have a lot of space to compost. What the bukashi does is it just turns your compost into nutrients much, much quicker, so that you can break down your food waste much quicker and really use that to put it back into your garden. And most of our community gardens will actually accept your bukashi bucket, so you can just take it to them, and they usually give you a clean bucket to take home then to add to their compost heaps. And that's all from me, Doug.
Thanks, Michelle. As always, very interesting. And Geraldine, over to you to close us out.
So much, Doug. I think we are completely and utterly blown away. If nobody got inspired tonight, you're never going to get inspired. A huge thanks go to Bevan, who started off us with the really inspiring video. Ben, thank you so much. Excellent, excellent articles and suggestions, and every conceivable kind of photograph for any kind of possible large, small, medium, minuscule garden, and the fact that there's WhatsApp support and lovely material. Thank you for that. Wolfgang, if you can grow it in Namibia, surely the rest of us can grow it where there's water in the rest of South Africa. So brilliant photographs, and thank you, Michelle, for telling us how to do the compost. Guys, all of the information, almost information overload tonight, will be posted on the District 9350 Foodgardens website. So if you were frantically writing, or if you wanted to have any of these people come and talk to your club, or just pick up something that somebody said, please check it out. It's being copied, videoed, every photograph, every word, it's all available. Let's get out there and feed the nation. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, Geraldine, and also thanks to the whole team for putting this all together. There's an immense amount of work that goes on in the background. Thanks, folks. See you in a month's time. Have a fantastic evening, and let's go and grow our gardens. Cheers all.
Thanks. Thanks very much. Bye now.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, Bevan.